Thank you so much, Dan Crenshaw, for joining us.
Great to be with you.
I want to start by talking about this infamous speech, or famous speech, depending on your perspective, of JD Vance at the Munich Security Conference.
Yeah.
Now, the reaction to that from many European leaders has been one of perhaps an epic meltdown. It's a good way to describe it. We saw the chairman of that conference actually crying, discussing his speech. Yeah, he was.
I didn't see that.
Okay, so you were in the room, I hear, when the speech was given. Did you see any of the reactions?
I didn't see any crying. If I did, I would think that would have been a little unwarranted. Look, I'm sure there was reactions. It was a very forceful speech. He definitely beat the dead horse about censorship, and that is something that concerns us. Just as partners in Western civilization, it concerns me a great deal to see some of the things we see regarding censorship in European countries. That being said, it was the Munich Security Conference where the main topic was, of course, these oncoming negotiations in Ukraine. And I point people to what the administration and JD Vance himself said earlier, or the day before, which was regarding the security of our transatlantic relationship and what we plan on doing in Ukraine. And he said, look, nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table, and I think that's good news for Europeans. There's been a lot of anxiety over what might happen in these negotiations, and I remind everyone, look, they haven't even started yet. There's been anxiety about Ukraine not having a say, and I'm like, that's not what the administration is saying at all. That same day or the next day, it's all a blur to me at this point, but I was in the lunch called Win with Ukraine, and General Kellogg was questioned on this issue. He's one of the main special envoys here. And he was directly asked, will Ukraine have a seat at the table? And he said, of course. I mean, how can you have a negotiation without one side? It's very obvious to us that Ukraine will have a seat at that table. And I met with Zelensky as well on that trip. And I think the Ukrainians are more optimistic than I think the headlines show, because there's a paradigm shift now, and it's much needed. You can't go on the same strategy that we're using, which is really no strategy at all. Trying to win a war of attrition against a country that does not care about how much it loses. That's a hard thing to do. And my message to Europeans who have been hand-wringing about this and clutching their pearls about what we might give up and all of that, I'm like, well, you know how you get a better negotiated settlement that's more positive for Ukraine and gets what you want, which is a message to Putin that this is unacceptable, some kind of punishment, quote unquote. You get to that level by being uncomfortably aggressive, so that when American negotiators are in the room, they can be the good guys and you can be the bad guys. This is classic negotiation.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com YouTube.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
You need a good cop, bad cop. Trump is very clever here to reach out to Putin and try to be the good cop here, while also holding a massive amount of firepower and economic firepower should he choose to use it. We should be more optimistic and I think have a little bit more faith in how Trump deals. Look, there is nobody in the world who wants to be taken advantage of less than Trump does. Does that make sense? That's what General Kellogg said. He's like, President Trump is the last guy in the world who's going to walk away from something feeling like he didn't get everything he could out of that deal. And so I think we should, look, we've barely started. We haven't even really started talks. Yesterday's talks were just a relationship building talk to an agreement to have talks. Let's let that play out. And meanwhile, I'd like to see the Europeans doing exactly what Zelensky called for, actually. Look at an EU, a European army that says to Putin, hey, we're sick of this. We might go in. I know that sounds extreme, but I just want people to imagine that thought experiment. Imagine if that were the case. Imagine how much more leverage you now have over Putin. He doesn't want that.
And do you think that American boots should be on the ground in Ukraine as peacekeepers as a part of those negotiations?
Look, nothing's off the table, but we'd rather see Europeans do it. We'd rather see Europeans defend their own continent. We'd rather see Europeans be able to defend their own continent. It shouldn't even be a question in the future. That's not going to happen overnight, but it should never be a question that you can defend your own continent. That's a main message that I think Europeans haven't heard enough of over the last 4 years when Biden was in charge.
And what about these reports that Trump may pull out troops across Europe back to the United States? After the Second World War, obviously there's been troops based in Europe all that time. There's been some reports in the press that over the last few days that might happen. Do you think that's possible?
I would, very unlikely. I've never heard that. Yeah,
so you wouldn't
don't even know
that?
how to comment on that. I've never heard it at all.
Yeah, you wouldn't support that?
I wouldn't support it, and I don't think it's even on the table.
Yeah. The former Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom, Ben Wallace, he said that Trump's kind of strategy towards the Ukraine peace negotiations reminded him of how Neville Chamberlain acted during the late 1930s with appeasement. Do you think that's an apt comparison that Donald Trump is trying to appease Putin?
No, that's a total misreading of the situation. If you want to bring Neville Chamberlain into it, I think a better comparison would be the last few years. Like Europeans buying and becoming reliant on Russian energy, pretending like this wouldn't happen. So you have that on one side, and then you have President Biden saying, well, it depends on what kind of incursion. That was a green light right away. Then you had kind of the Russian apologists saying, well, he'll never invade Kiev. Maybe they just want the Russian ethnic populations in the Donbass region. Well, so you take all that. It's like that's if you're going to bring Neville Chamberlain into it, whether that's a fair comparison or not. The too little, too late. The fear of escalation that we've seen from European leaders and President Biden over the last few years, because oh my God, Putin says something, we better be scared. When is Europe going to realize that you need to be scary in order to have leverage? You need to. You used to be. Let's get back to that. But when's the last time anyone has ever been afraid of what Europeans might do? You need to get back to that very quickly. That's the only way to establish strategic deterrence. One of the things about Trump is, like him or not, and no matter how nice he is to Putin, Putin believes him when he threatens him. When Trump was president and Putin talked about invading Ukraine, Trump said, don't do that, I'll bomb the shit out of Moscow. And Putin wasn't sure if he was lying or not. You know what he never did? Invade Ukraine. And so, I do not see any analogy to Neville Chamberlain and Donald Trump here. Again, Donald Trump is not somebody who ever wants to be taken advantage of.
I know that in the past you've been seen as more on the kind of hawkish neocon wing of the Republican Party. Do you recognise that kind of label as, do you see yourself as like a neocon? And what do you think?
I think neocon's a stupid label used by people who don't know how to articulate whatever it is the heck they want to say. It's funny, I'm like, how am I a neocon? Did I vote for the Iraq War? I was in college. Sorry, I just fought in the wars. I didn't actually vote for them. So anyway, neocon's a stupid label to begin with. It doesn't mean anything. I see myself as somebody who believes in American leadership. that if there's a retraction of American leadership, then by definition, somebody will fill that vacancy. So if you want your children to grow up in a world and a global economy that's run by China for the most part, then by all means, just retract and do nothing. So I don't believe in that. I believe in the Trump doctrine. And by the way, Trump is not an isolationist either. And obviously there's an isolationist wing and an anti-Ukraine wing of even the conservative movement and the far left. It's like they always meet together. They're kind of the same people, let's be honest. Trump has never been that. And for anybody who has questions about how he operates, look for 4 years. He was president for 4 years, everyone. NATO didn't fall apart. Ukraine got stronger under Trump. Ukraine maybe never would have even fended off the Russians without Trump for 4 years. You know why? Because Trump was the first to actually deliver real weapons to Ukraine. He without him, I think it would be Russia right now. That's a fact.
So do you think it was right that President Biden sent so much military aid to Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars in American taxpayer money? Do you think that was money well spent?
Well, it's not nearly as much as you just said. It's maybe $100 billion right now. So when you break that down
That's a significant amount of money, though.
It's significant, but it's less than 5% of our annual defense spending also. And we've managed to not lose a single American life. We've managed to completely regenerate our own defense industry, which is very, very necessary, especially if we want to create the kind of weapons we need to fend off Taiwan from the Chinese aggression, and prepare for just basically a multipolar world that we're entering. America's gotten nothing but benefits from this. We're learning all of the new things about the future of warfare. The best drone makers in the world are Ukrainian. They are the most innovative, and we're learning all of it. We take all of it. We keep all of it. America has gained quite a bit. The big mistakes that Biden made was always too little, too late. You could have had a massively different situation right now if the Europeans and President Biden hadn't been so scared of everything Putin said. There was legitimate understanding of that fear of escalation maybe a month into the war, but to any person who understands Putin and understands warfare and understands that situation, knows that after that there was no real fear of escalation.
So you think more money should have been sent to Ukraine?
They should have done the right weapons earlier on. Now, they only got to it way later on with a lot of lives lost, and now, and decreasing Ukrainian morale and decreasing Ukrainian human ability to keep the fight going. And so it makes a lot of sense to have a negotiation right now. Where that negotiation goes, I don't know. I mean, let's do the best we can to leverage it in the best possible way. And do the best for Ukraine, who is clearly the victim in all of this. This isn't, of course, there are some in Europe and in my country who see this as a war against peers, like a two-way street, I guess. And it's not. No, only one country invaded another country without any provocation. This idea that NATO provoked them is nonsense. That's an excuse that's been exacerbated by Russian propaganda. It's complete BS. Putin has no fear of NATO. To the extent that he has fear of NATO, he only doesn't like it because it means he can't conquer other countries. So,
just coming back to this $100 billion to Ukraine, I know that people like Tucker Carlson would make the argument that there's a real opportunity cost there. We could have spent that money on the border or fixing, issues in America. Yeah. What do you make of that argument that all this money could have been spent to help Americans and not Ukrainians?
Well, you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We spend 75-80% of our budget on a welfare state in America, on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I would love to ask Tucker what he thinks that $100 billion should be spent on, and if he would vote for it as a conservative. Tucker doesn't know what he's talking about. Tucker likes to visit Moscow and talk about how great the grocery stores are. So I don't really take his advice very seriously.
And just coming back to J.D. Vance's speech that I mentioned before. Do you agree with Vance about the issues facing Europe? Because he was not only talking about freedom of speech, but also mass migration. Do you think those are two things that Europeans need to kind of wake up to?
Yeah. I mean, is European domestic policy my core interest? Not really. But it's hard to disagree with anything you said. I mean, these are real stories of people being jailed for what we would consider just incomprehensible given our First Amendment rights. So, I think what he wanted to wrap that speech into, I don't know if it landed this way, but I think what he was saying was important. He's like, look, we are friends. Like, we have shared values. We are Western civilization. So let's sometimes look inward and think what we're doing wrong also, so that we know what we're defending. I think that's what he was trying to say, and that's worth saying. But it's up to Europeans to deal with it. To deal with your immigration issues, just like we're dealing with ours. So I would encourage you to, but I'm not running for office around here. So,
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.